She sang Italian lullabies to calm his daughter. Mafia boss said only her mother knew that song. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. I remember the moment the door clicked shut behind me. The quiet inside that penthouse felt different, like the air carried someone else's memories. I was just a part-time babysitter, a woman trying to cover rent on a tiny studio apartment, and I never expected my life to change because of a child with dark curls and wide, frightened eyes. Her name was Sofia, 6 years old, small for her age. She had not spoken much since the night her world fell apart. At least that was what the assistant told me before rushing out the door. I could feel the weight of the silence she lived in. It pressed into the room, heavy and cold. I sat on the rug beside her bed. She hid under the blanket and refused to look at me. I tried soft words first. Calm breathing. Gentle questions. Nothing reached her. Nothing softened the fear trembling through her small shoulders. I tried humming a tune my grandmother used to sing when thunderstorms rattled our windows back home. Then without thinking I shifted into the lullaby she used most often, that old Italian melody that drifted around my childhood like a warm hand on my back. I thought it was simply a song I had heard when I was young. I never questioned why it stayed with me. The moment the first line left my mouth, Sofia froze. Not out of fear. Something else. Recognition. Her tiny hand eased the blanket down. Her eyes found mine, shining in the dim lamplight. When I reached the chorus, she leaned forward as if the melody itself pulled her closer. It was the first connection she had made with anyone in a very long time. I kept singing, letting the room fill with a warmth I had never felt inside a stranger's home. Sofia crawled toward me and pressed her small head against my shoulder. Her breath steadied. The tremors stopped. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her heartbeat slow under my hands. For the first time that night, she felt safe. That was when the door opened again. I did not hear footsteps, but I felt a presence shift the room. I turned and saw him outlined in the doorway, the man whose reputation whispered through the city like a warning. Tall, sharply dressed, eyes dark as midnight water. The kind of man people crossed the street to avoid. The man they called a ghost in a suit. The Mafia boss. He did not look at me at first. His gaze was locked on his daughter, who was finally sleeping against my chest. When his eyes moved to me, I felt pinned in place. He stepped closer with a control that felt like danger disguised as elegance. Then he said it with a voice that held disbelief and something that felt almost like grief. Only her mother knew that song. He stepped closer with the kind of deliberate grace that made the room seem smaller. His presence filled the space, forcing the air out of the room, leaving me breathless. I still had Sofia's head against my chest, her small form so fragile in my arms, but the man who stood in front of me commanded a different kind of attention. I didn't know what to say. Words felt useless, a distraction from the palpable tension in the room. I kept my gaze fixed on him, unsure if I should speak, unsure of what would happen if I did. His eyes flicked from his daughter, sleeping peacefully, to me, and in the silence that followed, I could feel the weight of his stare. He looked at me like I was something both foreign and familiar, like he was trying to place me in a world I had never known. Only her mother knew that song. He repeated softly, as if to himself, but his gaze remained sharp. His voice was low, controlled, but there was an underlying tension that spoke of something darker. Where did you learn it? The question was simple, yet it felt like the beginning of something complicated, something I wasn't ready for. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. It's an old lullaby. My grandmother used to sing it to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable, before he nodded slowly, as though the answer had satisfied him, though I couldn't help but feel that it didn't. Sofia's mother, she knew that song. She would sing it to her when she was upset, just like you did. It calms her, he said, his eyes now softening as he looked at his daughter. I was still trying to piece together the fragments of the conversation, but one thing was clear. The man in front of me wasn't just any father. He was someone who carried a weight much heavier than I had imagined. His world wasn't like mine. His world had secrets. Sofia stirred in my arms, her tiny hand gripping the fabric of my shirt as she shifted. I looked down at her, the way she clung to me, trusting me in a way that felt both fragile and powerful at the same time. The Mafia boss watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable, before his attention shifted back to me. "You've done more for her than anyone else has," he said quietly, his voice almost gentle. "I'm grateful." His words were simple, but the way he said them made them feel heavy, as though they carried more than just gratitude. I nodded, unsure of how to respond, but he wasn't finished. "I don't know who you are or why you're here, but you've earned my respect. And if you ever need anything." His words trailed off, but the promise was clear. There was power in them, power that made my heart race. There was no mistaking that this was not a simple thank you. He was offering something far more dangerous, far more complicated. I shifted, still holding Sofia, and tried to find my footing in this strange new reality. "I'm just a sitter. I'm just here to help," I said, my voice a little shaky. "I'm not looking for anything from you." He studied me for a moment longer, as if weighing my words. "We all want something," he said finally. "You'll see." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. He wasn't just talking about favors or money. He was talking about something much deeper, something that connected us in ways I couldn't understand yet. I took a step back, keeping Sofia close. "I don't want any trouble," I said, trying to make my voice sound stronger than I felt. "I'm just here for her. That's all." The Mafia boss raised an eyebrow, as if considering my words. "Then keep doing what you're doing," he said. "Keep singing to her. Keep her calm. You don't know what you've stepped into, but as long as you don't cause problems, we'll have no issues." I wasn't sure if I should be relieved or terrified. There was something in his voice, in the way he spoke, that made me feel both. But what could I do? I was already caught in his web, whether I wanted to be or not. As he turned to leave, his eyes lingered on me for just a moment longer. "I'll have someone pick you up tomorrow. We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I watched as he walked away, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Sofia was still asleep in my arms, her breathing steady. I couldn't help but feel like I had just crossed a line. There was no going back from this, no returning to the life I had before. Whatever world I had stepped into, it was far from ordinary, and it was pulling me in faster than I could resist. The next morning, I woke to the sound of soft knocking on the door. The light outside was still dim, as if the sun hadn't fully decided to rise. I looked down at Sofia, who was still curled up beside me, her tiny hand clutching onto my sleeve. I didn't want to disturb her, but I knew the knocking wouldn't stop until I answered. I slowly shifted out of bed, careful not to wake her, and made my way to the door. When I opened it, I was greeted by a man in a dark suit. He wasn't much older than me, but the way he carried himself made him seem much more serious, as if he were used to handling things far more dangerous than what I was prepared for. "Good morning, miss," he said, his voice polite but firm. "I've been sent to pick you up. The boss wants to speak with you." His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. The boss. I had a feeling I wasn't talking about some regular businessman. I glanced back at Sofia, still asleep in her bed, and then back at the man. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," I said, my voice shaky despite my attempts to sound calm. "I'm just here to help. I didn't sign up for whatever this is." The man gave me a look, one that seemed like a warning. "You don't have to be ready. You're already in this now," he said with a hint of finality. I nodded, even though the words didn't offer me any comfort. I grabbed my jacket and went to the door, taking one last look at Sofia to make sure she was okay. The man stepped aside, his hand motioning toward the hallway. "Let's go," he said. The walk to the car felt like it took forever. Every step I took echoed through the empty hallways, the silence making my mind race with thoughts of what might be coming. The car was parked outside, sleek and black, the windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I hesitated before getting in, unsure of what to expect. The man in the suit opened the door for me, his eyes cold but polite. I climbed in, and the moment the door clicked shut, the car started moving. The drive was long, quiet, and uncomfortable. The streets we passed through were unfamiliar, and I kept my eyes trained on the road ahead, trying to keep my thoughts in check. I couldn't stop thinking about the boss, about the man who had been watching me and Sofia. Who was he really? And what did he want with me? My mind kept running in circles, but I couldn't come to any conclusions. The car finally slowed as it turned into a gated estate, large iron gates opening with a smooth, almost eerie precision. We drove up the long driveway, the mansion towering in front of us like a fortress. It was everything I had imagined, and yet nothing like I expected. The car stopped in front of the large entrance, and I was escorted out by the same man. As I walked inside, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of awe and fear. The hallway was grand, filled with dark wood paneling and marble floors that gleamed under the soft lighting. There were no sounds except the faint echo of footsteps. "Follow me," the man said. I did as he asked, my heart pounding in my chest. As we walked, I noticed the guards positioned at every corner, watching me with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight. Finally, we reached a large set of double doors. The man knocked once before pushing the door open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and there, sitting behind a massive desk, was the Mafia boss. He looked just as imposing as I remembered, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. When he saw me, he didn't stand, but his gaze was piercing, almost as if he was trying to read me like a book. "Sit," he said, his voice low and commanding. I took a seat across from him, unsure of what to say, what to do. My hands were clammy, and my heart was still racing. "I understand you've been taking care of Sofia," he said, his tone surprisingly soft. "That means more to me than you could know." I didn't say anything at first, unsure of how to respond. "She's been through a lot," I finally said, my voice shaky. "I'm just trying to help her, keep her calm. She deserves a peaceful life, even if it's just for a little while." The boss nodded slowly, his gaze not leaving mine. "I appreciate that," he said. "But there's more to this than just looking after her. You've been brought into something much bigger, something that involves all of us now." His words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. I didn't know what he meant, but I was starting to get a sinking feeling in my stomach. "I'm not part of your world," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't belong here." The boss studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're already part of it," he said quietly. "You've already made a connection with Sofia. And now, you're tied to this family." The way he said it made my blood run cold. I didn't want to be a part of whatever dangerous world he was referring to, but it felt like there was no way out. I was trapped, and there was nothing I could do to change that. He leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. "You can't leave, not now. You're in this for the long haul." My heart sank as I realized the truth of his words. There was no turning back. I was caught in his world, and I didn't know how to escape. The days following that meeting with the boss were a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, and now, there was no way to go back. Sofia had become more attached to me, and each time she smiled or whispered a quiet thank you, it only made me more nervous. The Mafia world was vast, dark, and unpredictable, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I was becoming a part of it. I spent my days with Sofia, keeping her calm, reading to her, singing the lullabies she had started to love, but the weight of my situation never left me. The boss had been clear, I was in this for the long haul. And somehow, I knew that meant more than just watching over his daughter. Every night after Sofia went to bed, I would find myself staring at the ceiling, wondering what the future held. Would I ever be able to leave this life behind? Or was I stuck here forever, in a world where I didn't belong? One evening, after a long day of taking care of Sofia, I was summoned again. The man in the dark suit, who had picked me up before, appeared at the door. "The boss wants to speak with you again," he said, his voice as emotionless as ever. I followed him through the house, my mind racing with questions. When we reached the study, I found the Mafia boss sitting behind his desk, his gaze fixed on a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Sit," he commanded. I sat down across from him, trying to steady my nerves. "How is Sofia?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was an intensity behind his words that made me uneasy. "She's doing well. She's adjusting," I replied, doing my best to keep my voice steady. "Good," he said, nodding. "I've been keeping an eye on you. I can tell you're trying to keep your distance from all of this, but it's not that simple." His words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know what he meant, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. "You're a part of my family now, whether you like it or not," he continued, his gaze never leaving mine. "And that means you're tied to everything that comes with it. You'll need to learn the rules, whether you want to or not." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words stuck in my throat. I didn't belong in this world. I had no desire to be part of his dangerous empire. but I knew better than to argue with him. There's more to you than meets the eye, he said, his voice lowering slightly. I've been watching you, and I know you're not just a simple caretaker. There's something about you, something that connects you to this world in ways you don't even understand. I tried to ignore the knot that was forming in my stomach, but it was hard to shake the feeling that he was speaking the truth. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The boss leaned back in his chair, his expression softening for a moment. I don't want anything from you, at least not yet. But I do need you to understand something. You're here because I believe you can help Sofia. And if you're willing to stay, you'll be part of something much bigger than yourself. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I fought to swallow it down. And if I don't stay? I asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me carefully, as if weighing my words. Then you leave, he said finally. But leaving isn't easy. You'd be walking away from everything you've come to know. From Sofia. From me. The weight of his words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't want to leave. I had grown to care for Sofia, and despite everything, I felt a strange connection to the boss, a sense of duty that I couldn't explain. But could I truly be a part of this world? Could I continue to live in the shadows, knowing the dangers that came with it? I wasn't sure. The boss stood up and walked around the desk, his presence even more imposing now that he was standing. There are things you don't know about me, things that go beyond business. I've built this empire, but I've lost people along the way. People I couldn't protect. I need to know you're not one of them. I looked up at him, my heart racing. What does that mean? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as if deciding how much to reveal. It means that I'm giving you a choice, he said finally. You can stay, learn what you need to survive in this world, or you can walk away and never look back. But if you choose to stay, there's no going back. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. My heart was pounding, and I knew that whatever decision I made next would change everything. I'll stay, I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I'll stay and protect Sofia. The boss nodded, as if he had been expecting that answer. Good, he said. Then let's begin. The next few days were a blur of new routines and unfamiliar faces. I spent most of my time with Sofia, trying to create some sense of normalcy for her in a world that had been turned upside down. The mansion had become our home, and while it was beautiful beyond words, it felt cold. There were always guards, always eyes watching. It wasn't just the house that made me uneasy, though. It was the world I had entered. The Mafia boss kept his distance, but I could feel his presence in every corner of the house. His men were everywhere, and I wasn't sure if I was being protected or trapped. Sofia had begun to open up to me more, and her trust was the only thing that kept me from losing my mind. We spent hours together, reading, drawing, and yes, singing the lullaby that seemed to calm her more than anything else. I couldn't deny the bond we were forming, and I knew that no matter how dark the world around us was, I would do whatever it took to keep her safe. One afternoon, after a long day of trying to get Sofia to eat something other than crackers, I was called to meet the boss again. His men were waiting for me, as always. I followed them through the house, my heart pounding in my chest. The closer I got to his study, the more my stomach twisted with anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something I wasn't prepared for. When I entered, he was standing by the window, looking out over the city. He didn't turn when I walked in, but his voice cut through the silence. You've been doing well with Sofia, he said, his tone smooth but unreadable. I've been watching you. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. I'm just doing my best, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned then, his dark eyes locking onto mine with a strange intensity. I know, he said, but there's more to this than just keeping her safe. I need to know I can trust you, that you're not just going to walk away when things get hard. His words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You're more involved than you think, he said, his voice low and commanding. This family isn't just a place. It's a world, and you're a part of it now. I need to know that you can handle it, that you'll stand by us when the time comes. I took a step back, my heart racing. I had known that there was more to this world than I could understand, but hearing it from him made it all too real. I don't know if I can, I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I'm just a caretaker. I'm not cut out for this kind of life. The boss regarded me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he reached into his desk and pulled out a thick file. He opened it and slid it across the desk toward me. This is your new life, he said. You'll need to read it carefully. You can't turn back once you've seen it. I hesitated, staring at the file, knowing that this was it. This was the moment that would change everything. Slowly, I opened the file. The first page was a list of names, some of them familiar, some I didn't recognize. There were photographs, addresses, and notes written in the margins. I flipped through the pages, my eyes widening as I read. This wasn't just a mafia operation. This was a network, a dangerous web of people and businesses that stretched across the country. And I was in the middle of it now. I looked up at him, my mind spinning. What is this? I asked, my voice shaky. You're part of it, he said simply. And you'll need to know everything. The stakes are higher than you realize, and you can't afford to be ignorant. I closed the file, feeling the weight of it pressing down on me. This wasn't what I had signed up for. But I didn't have a choice. I was already in too deep. I can't do this alone, I said, my voice cracking. I need help. The boss's eyes softened slightly, but there was no warmth in them. You're not alone, he said. You have me. And the family. But understand this, Elena. There's no turning back. I nodded, feeling the gravity of his words sink in. This was my life now, whether I liked it or not. The mafia boss had just made me a part of his world, and there was no escaping it. All I could do now was survive and protect Sofia, because in this world, she was the only thing that mattered. The days following my meeting with the boss felt like I was walking on a tightrope, unsure of where the next step would take me. The mansion was quieter now, the echoes of footsteps and whispered conversations surrounding me like an invisible fog. I spent my time with Sofia, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her. But the truth was, nothing felt normal anymore. The guards, the watches, the way everyone moved with purpose, it was all part of a world I wasn't sure I wanted to be a part of. Every day, I could feel the pressure building, like I was being pulled deeper into something that had no escape. I had agreed to stay, to protect Sofia, but what did that really mean? What was I protecting her from? And what was I becoming in the process? I spent hours with her, reading, singing, trying to make her smile, but I knew she sensed the tension in the house, just like I did. One afternoon, as I was sitting on the floor with Sofia, helping her with her drawing, the door to the room opened. The man in the dark suit, the one who had taken me to the boss before, stood there, his eyes unreadable. The boss wants to see you, he said, his voice calm but firm. I didn't question him. I knew better by now. Sofia looked up at me, her eyes wide, but I smiled at her, trying to reassure her. I'll be back soon, sweetheart, I said, my voice gentle. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. I followed the man down the hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. When we reached the study, the door was already open. The mafia boss was sitting at his desk, papers scattered in front of him, but he wasn't focused on them. His gaze was on me, his eyes sharp, calculating. Sit, he said, his voice commanding but not unkind. I took a seat across from him, feeling the weight of his stare. I've been watching you, he said, his voice steady. You've done well with Sofia. Better than I expected. His words should have been comforting, but they only made me feel more trapped. Thank you, I said quietly, unsure of what else to say. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping on the desk. But I need to know you're more than just a babysitter, Elena, he said, his tone suddenly serious. I need to know you can handle what's coming. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing. This isn't just about Sofia anymore. This is about loyalty, about power, and about making sure that my family is safe. The way he said it made my stomach churn. I wasn't sure what kind of family he was talking about, but I could feel the danger in his words. I'm just trying to do what's right, I said, my voice shaky. I'm here for Sofia. I don't want any part of this world. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked toward the window, his back to me. I could see his reflection in the glass, his broad shoulders and sharp jawline. He looked like a man who had everything, but at the same time, nothing. You're already part of it, Elena, he said quietly, almost to himself. You're here. You've made a choice by staying. And now, you have to live with it. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had made a choice, but it wasn't the one I had wanted. I hadn't wanted this life, this world, but now it seemed like there was no way out. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He turned to face me, his eyes locking onto mine. "I want you to understand what you're part of," he said, his voice hardening. "I want you to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about Sofia. This is about protecting everything I've built. And if you can't handle that, then you need to leave." I stared at him, my heart racing. "I won't leave," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "I'll stay. I'll protect Sofia. But I don't want anything more." He nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "Good," he said. "Then you'll need to be ready. Because things are about to get complicated." I didn't know what he meant by that, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. The calm before the storm. And I was stuck in the middle of it. The rest of the conversation passed in a blur. He told me what was expected of me, what my role in this world would be. I nodded along, my mind racing. All I could think about was Sofia, about how I had to keep her safe. But the more I learned, the more I realized that my safety was no longer guaranteed. The Mafia boss had pulled me into his world, and now, there was no going back. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. I was living in the mansion, surrounded by luxury and danger in equal measure. The Mafia boss's words echoed in my mind, always reminding me that I was in this for the long haul. Sofia had become my responsibility, but the deeper I got into the world he controlled, the more I realized that I had no idea what I had really signed up for. The house was quiet most of the time, with guards positioned at every entrance and window. I had little time to myself, and when I did, my thoughts were always racing. Was I truly safe here? Or was I just another pawn in a world I didn't understand? I spent my days with Sofia, making sure she felt safe, making sure she didn't feel the weight of the world pressing in on her. The Mafia boss kept his distance, but there was always an air of tension when he was around. I knew I wasn't just there to care for Sofia. I was part of something bigger, something darker, and I could feel myself becoming more and more tied to it. One evening, after Sofia had gone to bed, I was summoned again. The man in the dark suit came to my door and said the boss needed to speak with me. My heart skipped a beat. What now? I followed him through the long corridors of the mansion, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The study doors opened, and the boss was sitting at his desk, papers spread out in front of him. He didn't look up immediately, but when he did, his gaze was intense. He motioned for me to sit, his eyes not leaving mine. "You've been doing well," he said, his voice calm but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "You've kept Sofia calm, and that's more than I expected." I nodded, not sure what to say. It wasn't just about keeping Sofia calm. It was about keeping her safe, and that felt like a monumental task. "But it's time for you to understand something," he continued, leaning forward slightly, his gaze hardening. "You're not just here to watch over Sofia. You're here because I need you to learn about this world, to become a part of it." My heart raced as he spoke. I had already known this, but hearing him say it aloud made it feel all the more real. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice betraying my nervousness. "You're in this now, Elena," he said, his tone growing more serious. "You're part of my world, and that comes with responsibility. You have to understand the stakes." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't what I had wanted, but I had no choice but to accept it. I was already in too deep. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, my voice quiet. "I didn't ask for any of this." He studied me for a long moment, his eyes not softening, but also not unkind. "No one ever asks for this world, Elena," he said, his voice low. "But it's here, and you're a part of it now. You'll need to learn how to protect yourself, how to protect Sofia, and how to survive in a place like this." I felt a chill run down my spine at the weight of his words. "I'm just trying to do what's best for Sofia," I said, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't want to be part of anything else. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving me. "That's your mistake," he said softly. "You think you're in control. But in my world, no one is in control except me." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on Sofia, on protecting her from the dangers that surrounded us, that I hadn't realized just how deep the danger went. I had no control. I never had. I was just a piece on a chessboard. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I want you to understand what's at stake, he said, his tone more commanding now. I want you to learn how to navigate this world, to survive it. You'll never be safe unless you learn the rules. And if I don't want to learn those rules? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. He stood up from his desk, walking over to the window, looking out over the city. Then you leave, he said quietly. But leaving isn't so simple. Once you're in this world, you're always in it. There's no escaping. The weight of his words hit me all at once. I had never been more aware of my own helplessness than I was in that moment. He was right. I couldn't escape. No one could. I'll do what you ask, I said, finally making a decision. For Sofia. He turned to face me, his gaze sharp. Good, he said. Then you'll learn, and you'll survive. For both of you. The tension in the room eased slightly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a deal with the devil. A part of me still wanted to walk away, to take Sofia and run, but I knew it was impossible. There was no running from this life. I was in it now, and I would have to learn how to survive. The following weeks passed in a haze, the weight of my new reality pressing down on me every moment. I had learned more about the Mafia boss and his empire than I ever wanted to know. The world I had entered was like a web, and I was a fly caught in it, with no way of escape. The mansion, once a place of solace for Sofia and me, had become a cage. I couldn't go anywhere without guards watching, without knowing that every move I made was being tracked. Every interaction with the Mafia boss or his men felt like a silent test. I was still trying to protect Sofia, to keep her safe, but I knew the world she was being raised in was dangerous, far more dangerous than I had realized. I spent my days with her, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. We played games, read stories, and I continued singing the lullaby that had become a small comfort to her. But even in the safety of our routine, I couldn't ignore the growing unease inside me. One evening, after Sofia had gone to bed, I was summoned once again to the boss's study. His men led me down the same cold, silent hallway. I didn't even need to ask why I was being called anymore. I knew. The moment I stepped into the study, the boss was standing by the window, his back to me. Come in, he said, his voice low. I've been expecting you. I stepped into the room, feeling the familiar weight of his presence. He didn't turn to face me right away, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every movement. When he finally turned, his gaze was intense, like he was looking for something in me, something I wasn't sure I had to give. You've done well with Sofia, he said, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. But you're still not ready. There's more to this than just protecting her. You need to understand the stakes. I swallowed hard. The last time he had said something like this, it had left me reeling. What do you mean? I asked, trying to steady my voice. You've been doing your part, he said, stepping closer. But now it's time for you to understand what it means to be part of this family, to be part of my world. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had already known that my life had changed in ways I couldn't control, but hearing it from him made it all too real. I've been watching you, Elena, he continued, his tone now serious. You think you're just here to watch over Sofia, but there's more to it. You're part of something bigger, something that requires loyalty. And loyalty, Elena, is not just a word here. It's a bond, a chain that ties you to us forever. I tried to speak, to argue, but the words wouldn't come. I was trapped, stuck between the life I once knew and the dark world I had been pulled into. You can't walk away from this, Elena, he said, his voice firm, like he was making a point I couldn't ignore. Not anymore. You're in this, whether you want to be or not. And if you want to protect Sofia, if you want to protect yourself, you need to understand that. The way he spoke made it clear that there was no escape. I had made a choice, whether I knew it or not, and now I was bound to it. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice trembling, the words finally breaking free. He didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. I want you to stay loyal, he said softly, but there was a coldness to his words that made me shiver. I want you to learn how to navigate this world, to survive in it. And I want you to understand what happens to people who don't stay loyal. His words were a warning, but they also held a strange promise. I knew what he was asking, what he was offering, but it wasn't something I could ever truly accept. I'm not like you, I said quietly, almost to myself. I can't be a part of this. He didn't react immediately, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something dark. You already are, he said, his voice colder now. You've been pulled into this whether you wanted it or not. And now, you'll have to make a choice. Stay and learn, and protect Sofia, or leave, and face the consequences. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket, smothering me. There was no easy way out of this, no way to go back to the life I once had. What are the consequences? I asked, barely able to breathe. He took a step forward, his gaze never leaving mine. You'll learn soon enough, he said softly, almost as if it were a secret. But if you choose to leave, there's no turning back. You'll lose everything. Your freedom, your safety, everything. I felt a cold chill wash over me as I realized the truth of his words. There was no leaving. There was no escape. I was already part of his world, and there was no way out. I'll stay, I said, my voice barely audible. I'll stay, but only for Sofia. The Mafia boss looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine as if weighing my words. Finally, he nodded. Good, he said. Then let's begin. The days after my decision to stay felt like a blur of new responsibilities and heavy expectations. I had already known that my life would never be the same, but now, I was learning what that truly meant. The Mafia boss, with his piercing gaze and calculated demeanor, had made it clear that I was a part of his world whether I wanted to be or not. He hadn't said it in so many words, but it was obvious. If I was going to survive in this world, I had to accept the rules, and I had to follow them without question. Sofia had become my focus, and everything I did, every step I took, was for her. But as the days wore on, I could feel the weight of the decisions I was making, and I started to wonder if I was doing the right thing. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for Sofia, to protect her from the dangers surrounding us. But the mansion, with its watchful eyes and its endless halls, felt like a prison. Every corner I turned, I found another reminder that I was trapped. One evening, after another long day of keeping Sofia entertained and safe, I was summoned to the boss's study once again. My heart sank when the man in the dark suit appeared at the door. The boss wants to see you, he said, his expression unreadable. I followed him through the house, my thoughts swirling in my mind. What now? What did he want from me this time? When I entered the study, the Mafia boss was sitting behind his desk, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the surface. He didn't look up right away, but I could feel his eyes on me, piercing through the silence. Sit, he said, his voice calm but firm. I took my seat across from him, my hands trembling slightly. You've been doing well, Elena, he said, his gaze finally meeting mine. You've been keeping Sofia calm, and that's good. But there's more to it than just that. My heart raced as I wondered what he was going to say next. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. You're not just here to babysit Sofia, he said, his tone hardening. You're here because I need you to be more. I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaky. What do you want from me? The boss studied me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. I want you to be loyal, he said, the word hanging heavily between us. I want you to understand that loyalty is everything in this world. And if you're not loyal, if you're not committed to the family, then you won't survive. His words hit me like a slap in the face. I had known that loyalty was important, but hearing it from him made it feel like a life or death matter. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I'll do what I have to do, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. But I'm not like you. I don't belong in this world. The boss leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You already are a part of this world, Elena, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You've been brought in, and there's no way out. You're either with us, or you're against us. And if you're against us, there's only one place for people like you. The weight of his words settled over me like a cold cloud. I didn't know what to say. I had made a choice, but it wasn't the one I had wanted. I never asked for this life, but here I was, stuck in it. What happens if I can't do this? I asked, my voice barely audible. The boss studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then you leave, he said, his tone final. But leaving is never as simple as you think. Once you're in, there's no going back. You'll always be marked. You'll always be a part of this. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the truth of his words. There was no escape from this world. Once you were in for good. I'll do what I can, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of my decision. The boss nodded, his gaze softening just slightly. Good. Then you'll start learning the rules. You'll start understanding what it takes to survive in this world. I didn't know if I was ready for any of this, but I knew I had no choice. I was already too far in, and there was no turning back. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at me. For Sofia. I'll protect her, no matter what. The Mafia boss looked at me for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then, without a word, he stood up and walked to the door. Then you'll learn, Elena, he said over his shoulder. And you'll survive. If you're lucky, you'll protect her too. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was in this world now, and there was no turning back. The following days were a blur of training and observation. The Mafia boss was a man of few words, but his expectations were clear. I had made a choice, and now it was time to learn how to survive in his world. Sofia had grown accustomed to me being around more, but I could see the toll the chaos around her was taking. She was quieter than before, her little eyes often scanning the house, as if trying to make sense of the unfamiliar world we were now living in. The mansion, once a symbol of power and wealth, had begun to feel like a gilded cage. The walls, lined with luxury, were now a constant reminder of how much I had lost. Every room seemed to hide secrets, and I knew that I was only scratching the surface. I spent hours with Sofia, teaching her the games and stories I had known as a child. I tried to make our small corner of this house a sanctuary for her, even as I felt myself slipping deeper into a world I couldn't escape. The boss, on the other hand, spent little time with either of us. He was always busy with his business, as he called it, but his presence loomed over us, a constant weight. I had become an invisible part of his life, someone to be relied on, but never fully seen. One evening, as I sat with Sofia in the sitting room, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see one of the boss's men standing in the doorway. "The boss wants to see you," he said, his expression as unreadable as always. I nodded and stood, feeling a familiar knot form in my stomach. Sofia looked up at me, her face a mix of confusion and unease. "Are you leaving?" she asked softly. I smiled at her, though it didn't reach my eyes. "I'll be right back," I promised. I kissed her forehead and left the room, my heart heavy with the weight of her gaze on me. The hallway felt longer than usual as I walked toward the study. The man in the suit led the way, his footsteps echoing in the silence. When we reached the door, he opened it and stepped aside. I entered the study and found the boss standing by the window, staring out at the city below. He didn't turn as I entered, but his voice rang out, firm and commanding. "Sit," he said. I did as I was told, taking a seat across from him. There was a moment of silence before he spoke again, his voice low but filled with authority. "I've been watching you, Elena," he said, his eyes still on the city. "You've been doing well with Sofia, but I need more from you. It's time for you to learn the rules of this world." His words sent a chill down my spine. I had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it feel all too real. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned then, his eyes locking onto mine. "You need to understand that loyalty is everything," he said. "In this world, loyalty is more valuable than anything else. If you don't have that, you have nothing." I nodded, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "I've told you before, you can't leave this life. You're part of it now, whether you like it or not." He continued, his tone unwavering. "And if you want to protect Sofia, you need to learn how to navigate this world. The people around you, the ones you think you can trust, they're not who they seem to be. Everyone has an agenda. Even you, Elena. You have your own reasons for being here. I need to know what they are." His words made my stomach turn. "I'm here to protect Sofia," I said, the answer coming out automatically, though it didn't feel like enough anymore. "I've already told you that." He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. "That's not enough," he said softly. "Everyone here has a role to play. You're not just her caretaker. You're part of this family now. And if you want to stay alive, you need to know how to play the game." The game. The words sounded so simple, yet it was anything but. In his world, loyalty wasn't just a word, it was a currency. And I was just starting to understand how little I knew about how it worked. I had thought I could keep my distance, that I could just focus on Sofia and forget about everything else. But the boss's words made it clear that wasn't an option. I had already made my choice, and now, There were no easy outs. What do you need me to do? I asked, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. The boss studied me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine as if looking for something. I need you to be my eyes and ears, he said finally. I need you to understand what's happening around you, even when it seems like nothing is. And I need you to make sure Sofia is kept safe. At all costs. I sat back in my chair, the weight of his request sinking in. He wasn't asking for something small, something easy. He was asking me to dive into the heart of his world and become a part of it. I will, I said, my voice steady, though inside, I felt like everything was unraveling. For Sofia, I will do whatever it takes. The boss nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. Good, he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. Then let's begin. The next few weeks blurred into one another. Every day, I tried to balance the chaos of the world around me with the quiet moments I spent with Sofia. I kept her safe, kept her calm, but I was beginning to understand just how little I truly knew about the life I had been pulled into. The Mafia boss had given me a role, a purpose, and now, it was time to learn the rules. I had become an unwitting participant in this dangerous game, and I wasn't sure how long I could last. The mansion, though beautiful, had started to feel more like a prison with each passing day. I was trapped in a world where every move was watched, every decision weighed. There was no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation. And every time I thought I understood the stakes, they grew higher. One night, after Sofia had fallen asleep, I was summoned to the study again. I had grown accustomed to these late-night meetings, but tonight, something felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as I walked down the long, dimly lit hall. The moment I stepped into the study, I saw the boss sitting at his desk, his back turned to me as he looked over papers. His presence filled the room, and I could sense his attention on me even before he spoke. Sit, he commanded, his voice as calm and calculated as always. I took my usual seat across from him, my heart racing as I waited for him to speak. When he finally turned to face me, his gaze was sharp, intense. He studied me for a long moment, as if searching for something. You've done well with Sofia, he said, his voice softening ever so slightly. But now, you need to understand why you're really here. My stomach tightened at his words. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay composed. The boss leaned forward, his fingers lightly tapping on the desk. You've become more than just Sofia's caretaker, he said. You've become a part of this family. And in my world, that means you're expected to do more than just protect her. You need to learn how to navigate the power structure, how to work within the family. His words felt like a blow, hitting me harder than I had anticipated. I hadn't signed up for this. I was here to care for Sofia, to give her some semblance of a normal life, not to become entangled in the dark world that surrounded the Mafia boss. I'm just trying to keep her safe, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anything about your world. The boss studied me for a long moment, and I could see the calculation behind his eyes. That's why you need to learn, he said quietly. You're in this now, Elena. And the only way to survive is to understand how things work. You're not just here for Sofia. You're here because you've been chosen. And I need to know if you're truly loyal. The word hung in the air like a heavy weight. Loyalty. It wasn't just about following orders or doing what was expected. In this world, loyalty meant something more, something far more dangerous. I'll do what it takes to protect Sofia, I said, trying to steady my shaking hands. I won't let anything happen to her. The Mafia boss's eyes flicked to my hands, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something like approval in his gaze. That's what I need to hear, he said, his voice low. But you need to understand that protecting her means becoming a part of this world. You can't shield her from everything. And when the time comes, you'll have to make difficult choices. You'll have to choose where your loyalty lies. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had already known this, deep down. I had known that my decision to stay meant more than just caring for Sofia. It meant becoming entangled in a dangerous web, one that I might never be able to escape. What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice shaky with uncertainty. The boss leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving me. I want you to prove your loyalty, he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. There are things happening in the family, things that require people who can be trusted, people who are willing to do whatever it takes to protect what's ours. I need you to show me that you can be that person. I swallowed hard. The stakes were higher than I had realized. This wasn't just about watching Sofia anymore. This was about surviving in a world where loyalty meant everything, and the price for betrayal was death. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. For Sofia. For the family. The boss nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. Good, he said, his tone softening just a bit. Then it's time for you to see what this world is really like. It's time for you to prove yourself. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that whatever was coming next would change everything. I had made my choice. And now, there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur of preparation. The Mafia boss had told me it was time to prove my loyalty, but the weight of those words settled over me like a storm cloud. What did that really mean? What would he ask of me? I spent most of my time with Sofia, trying to distract her from the growing tension in the house, but it was impossible to ignore. I could feel it in the air, the unspoken expectation, the pressure mounting with every passing moment. The mansion, once a place of beauty and elegance, had become a fortress, and I was its prisoner. The guards were everywhere now, their eyes following me wherever I went. Even in my most private moments, I felt their watchful gaze. I had been pulled into this world, whether I wanted to be or not, and there was no escaping it. It was all-consuming. One night, after Sofia had gone to sleep, I was summoned to the study once again. The door to the study was always open, but it felt like a barrier, a wall between the world I knew and the world I was being forced into. I entered the room, and the Mafia boss was standing by the window, his back to me. The room was dimly lit, the shadows casting long, eerie shapes across the walls. "Come in," he said, his voice calm. But there was something in the way he said it that made my skin crawl. I walked in and took my usual seat across from him, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what to expect this time, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. He turned to face me, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that felt like it could pierce through me. "You've been doing well," he said, his tone smooth, but there was an underlying coldness to it. "But now it's time for you to prove yourself. You're a part of this family now, Elena, and it's time you learned what that really means." His words hung in the air like a heavy weight. I felt my throat tighten as I tried to steady my breathing. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You're more than just Sofia's caretaker. I've seen the way you move through this house, the way you interact with the others. You've been careful, cautious, and that's good. But now, you need to learn how to really survive here." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "I'm just here to protect Sofia," I said, the words feeling hollow even as I said them. "That's all I care about." He nodded slowly, but there was something in his gaze that told me he didn't believe me. "Sofia's important," he said, "but she's not the only thing that matters. You're part of this family now, and that means you need to make choices. Hard choices. You need to understand that loyalty comes at a price, and if you're not willing to pay it, you won't survive." His words sent a cold shiver down my spine. I had thought I understood the stakes, but now it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way back. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "I need you to prove that you're ready to be a part of this world," he said, his voice like ice. "You've been living in the shadows, Elena, but now it's time for you to step into the light. You need to show me that you can handle what's coming." I didn't know what he meant by that, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that whatever it wasn't going to be easy. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "I'll protect Sofia, I'll stay loyal to the family. I'll do whatever you ask." He studied me for a moment, his gaze intense, searching for something. Finally, he nodded. "Good," he said, his voice softening just slightly. "Then you'll be ready when the time comes." The time? What time? What was coming? I didn't know, but I had a feeling that the answer would be far darker than I could imagine. He turned away from me and walked back to his desk, his movements smooth and deliberate. "I have a job for you," he said, his voice no longer soft. "It's not a simple task, but I believe you're ready." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned back to face me, his expression hardening. "I need you to go to the warehouse tomorrow," he said. "There's a shipment coming in." I need you to make sure everything goes smoothly. No mistakes. My heart skipped a beat. A shipment. I repeated, my voice shaking. What kind of shipment? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a long breath, his eyes narrowing as if weighing his words carefully. A shipment of weapons, he said, his voice cold and measured. It's part of the family's business. And I need you to make sure it's handled. No one can know about this. The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been thrust into a world far darker than I had ever imagined. A world where loyalty meant blood, and nothing was ever simple. I'll do it, I said, my voice firm even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I'll make sure everything goes smoothly. He nodded once, his gaze still fixed on me. Good, he said, his tone approving. Then tomorrow, you'll begin your real training. The tension in the room thickened, and I knew that everything was about to change. I had made my choice. Now, there was no turning back. The morning of the shipment arrived, and with it came the weight of everything I had been avoiding. The Mafia boss's orders were clear. I was to oversee the delivery, make sure everything went smoothly, and report back without hesitation. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew that this would be the defining moment of my place in this world. My footsteps echoed through the mansion as I made my way to the front door. The guards were stationed at their posts, their eyes following my every move. But today, their attention felt different. They were more than just watching. They were waiting, anticipating the moment when everything would change. I climbed into the car that awaited me, the engine's hum barely reaching my ears over the thoughts running wild in my head. I kept thinking about Sofia. What if something went wrong? What if I couldn't protect her? She had become my entire world, the one thing I was certain of in all the chaos. I had promised to keep her safe, but as the miles passed, the fear grew. The warehouse was located on the outskirts of the city, a place where the world felt different. It wasn't a place anyone would dare to venture without a reason, a place where the shadows seemed to linger longer. As the car stopped, the familiar, cold air of the underworld washed over me. The men in suits, the ones I had learned to recognize as part of the Mafia boss's crew, were already there, waiting. They barely acknowledged my arrival, their expressions unreadable, but they knew why I was here. I walked toward the entrance of the warehouse, my heart pounding in my chest. The door creaked open, and the smell of oil, metal, and something far more dangerous filled the air. Inside, stacks of crates sat neatly against the walls, each one marked with numbers and symbols I didn't understand. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. A few of the men were moving crates, and others were talking in low voices. The atmosphere was tense, the kind of tension that could snap at any moment. Everything is going as planned, one of the men said, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. He seemed confident, but I could see the slight tremor in his hands, a sign of the pressure we were all under. Good, I said, trying to sound more in control than I felt. I glanced around, taking in the room, noting every detail. I had never been in a place like this before, and the reality of it was overwhelming. I thought about Sofia again, about how innocent she was, how she didn't deserve this world. But here I was, in the middle of it, and there was no turning back. Suddenly, the sound of a truck pulling up broke my thoughts. The men went still, their attention snapping to the loading dock. I could feel the change in the air, the shift in energy. The shipment had arrived. The doors opened, and two men stepped out of the truck. They were carrying large, bulky crates, and as they unloaded them, I could see the outlines of what they were, guns. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was the heart of the operation. This was what I had signed up for. Is everything secure? I asked, my voice steady despite the panic that was starting to set in. The man who had spoken to me earlier nodded, his face grim. It's all in order, he said. We've been through this process 1,000 times. But something in his voice didn't sit right with me. I looked at the crates, the weapons, and I knew that I was standing on the edge of something far bigger than I could comprehend. Make sure everything is handled, I said, my voice taking on a more authoritative tone than I intended. The boss is expecting this to go smoothly. I didn't wait for a response as I turned and walked away, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just witnessed. The warehouse felt like it was closing in on me, its walls pressing against my chest. I had seen enough to understand what was happening here, but the question that lingered was what role I would play in it. The Mafia boss had given me a chance to prove myself, but I wasn't sure what I was proving. Was I truly loyal? Or was I just another pawn in a game that was far beyond my control? I left the warehouse with a sense of unease gnawing at my insides. The weight of the situation was too much to process. I had done what was asked of me. I had watched the shipment arrive, made sure it went smoothly. But I knew that this was only the beginning. There were more secrets, more dangers lurking in the shadows. And as I got into the car to head back to the mansion, I couldn't help but wonder what would come next. What would the Mafia boss want from me now? And more importantly, what kind of person would I become in this world? When I returned to the mansion, Sofia was waiting for me. She ran to greet me, her small arms wrapping around me tightly. I held her close, trying to push aside the feelings of dread and guilt that had been building inside me. "You're home," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. I smiled at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm always here for you," I said, my voice steady, though I felt anything but. But as I looked into her innocent eyes, I knew one thing for certain. I would do whatever it took to keep her safe, even if it meant losing myself in the process. In this gripping story, Elena is drawn into a dangerous world of dark romance where loyalty, power, and love collide. She becomes entangled in a mafia family's life, where her responsibility to protect a young girl named Sofia pulls her deeper into a web of dangerous decisions. As Elena tries to navigate the rules of the family, she is forced to confront her growing feelings for the cold, calculating mafia boss. Their relationship develops in a world that is far from ordinary, a world where dark romance thrives, and every action could lead to devastating consequences. As Elena gets closer to the mafia boss, the lines between right and wrong blur, leaving her questioning who she really is. The shadows of betrayal and trust loom over their every interaction, turning their bond into something more than just a simple connection. Will Elena survive in this perilous world of dark romance? Or will the price of loyalty and love be too high to pay? The tension continues to build as Elena faces choices that will determine her future. In this world of power, danger, and undeniable attraction, Elena must decide where her loyalty lies. This story is an unforgettable exploration of dark romance and the fine line between survival and surrender.